Before I show you my DIY dust collection system, let me first explain what I've done in the past, what I learned from this process, and why you might consider something similar. If you work in a space that has harmful particulates like sawdust, or in my case, clay dust, it's time you started thinking about the quality of the air in your space. This is my studio.
How wide is this room?
8 feet by 8 through there. 14.5 feet. Best toy ever as a kid. I've been working in my studio space for the last 2 years, and it's a small space, about 8 by 14 feet. Even if I'm careful with how I work with clay and everything, dust does build up. Even if you're mopping instead of sweeping, and standing outside instead of standing inside, because that's stupid, dust just happens to build up. With clay specifically, you have silica dust that comes from clay, you have fumes from the kiln, and if you're doing plaster or casting like I do, that's 3 things that have airborne particulates that you want to get out of your space. If you can, you want to get those things out of your space entirely, your kiln, all kinds of dust making activities. But if you have to deal with an inside space making dust, then having a way to filter the air or get it out of your space is necessary. In the past, I rigged together a low-quality bathroom fan and some piping to get fumes from the kiln outside and to try to get silica dust and plaster dust outside as well, with minimal success. The motor was only supposed to move about 40 CFM, and most kiln fans, if you read the description, move about 120 CFM. It's cubic feet per minute of air. My first system kind of worked, but it wasn't the best. It was time for a permanent solution, or semi-permanent. Now I'm fortunate to have 3 windows in my studio, and I tried putting a box fan in one window facing in and another window facing out. And that was good for kiln fumes, but it wasn't the best for silica dust or plaster dust. Now when I have a project that I want to complete, I'm always on the lookout for a deal or something that can solve my problem. There was a hardware store going out of business near me, and I went in and this is what I found. This is a through-wall kitchen fan. For kitchens up to 90 square feet, for laundry and rec rooms up to 225 square feet, which this space is 14.5 by 8, which makes it 80, 32, 116. So we're well within the range of size of room you're supposed to use this fan for. Now, I won't get into the specifics, but a through-wall fan means it's supposed to go through the wall. But I'm not sure what the space is going to be in 2 or 5 years. I'm hoping a ceramic studio, but if my wife and I move from this house, I don't know if the new owners will want a through-wall fan in this room. Maybe this is gonna be a bedroom, and you don't wanna have a through-wall fan in a room like this. So instead of hastily punching a hole in a wall and exposing this room to the elements, I thought I would just install it into a wood board that I could move into and out of each window space, and then I could figure out where it's used best, or if I want to make any modifications to the system. So I unboxed the parts, got the old board from the window, and started making measurements to ultimately make mistakes and fine-tune and perfect my plan. This was the old venting spot that would go outside, and then there's a window here. With that window outside, I'll have to remove it every time I want to use it. That gives me a lot of room around the top, enough meat on the sides to fasten it in place. This could work. Now because I got the fan on clearance for $20, I wanted to keep this project as low cost as I could. And so I started with the old wood board from the previous system, figuring I could make mistakes, change things on the fly, and then use it as a rough draft for the final version. This was a good idea because right away I was making changes and marking up my board, and I didn't have to worry about how the final product looked. I learned a lot about what I wanted and what I didn't want, and that made the whole process less stressful and ultimately more fun. All I had to do to get this ventilation system up and running was to cut an 8-inch hole in the center, then screw in the shroud, wire up the system, and turn it on.
Get up, get up.
Looks pretty good to me. Here's the back side. So this little overhang here should easily clear the outside edge of the window. Now I don't know how electrical savvy you are, but I'm breezing through a lot of the wiring up here. I've done some wiring in the past, I followed the instructions, and I googled things I wasn't sure about for clarification, and I was able to get through it pretty easily. But really it wasn't that complicated. It was a couple of wires in the right order, and then I was ready to go. There was only one big hiccup during this whole process.
Whew!
So with everything wired up and the shroud and the fan screwed into place, it was time to give this a test.
You know, actually, we could test it right now. I'm gonna give it a shot.
Plug it in, knob goes on. Yes! As you can see, this fan pushes a lot of air. But would it pull silica dust or plaster dust out of my pottery studio? The best way to find out was to test it. So I grabbed a few pieces of greenware and a green Scotch-Brite sponge, and I sanded right in front of the fan to see if it would pull that dust out of the space. It worked really well, so it was time for the final design. Now, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And the fan that I bought moves 180 CFM, meaning 180 cubic feet per minute. Now to give you an idea of what that means, let's say you had a room that was 10 by 10 feet by 18 feet high, which is kind of a weird room, but that's 1,800 square feet. And with a fan that moves 180 CFM, it would change out all of the air in the space in only 10 minutes. If your room was only 180 cubic feet, then that fan will clear the air in only 1 minute. With a fan this powerful and this nice, I wanted to give it as powerful and nice a look as I could when it was finished, while keeping the costs low. The biggest change that I made to the final design of this ventilation system was to keep it flush with the inside wall. Why, you ask? Well, there's an exterior window to my studio space.
With that window outside, I'll have to remove it every time I want to use it.
That I would have had to remove if it was inside the window. Keeping it flush with the interior wall allowed the whole shroud to fit inside of that space while keeping the exterior window on, which would be way less tedious. Besides the last system not being powerful enough to move air out of the space, it was also a solid wood board that blocked all of the natural light to my studio.
If I had my vent there, all of this area would block out all the natural light.
So during the design process of the new board, I decided to add 4 open areas for natural light. This way, if the board was up permanently, I would still get light coming through the studio from the south. Now this is the fun part, so enjoy the build montage.
materials list for the final build are as follows: 3/4 inch plywood, 1/2 by 3/4 inch trim for framing, white primer and white satin spray paint, white house paint, plexiglass, some nails and some screws. The only new thing that you haven't seen that I used with this vent is a plastic bin full of water for when I sand. I put that below the vent. When I'm sanding, the heavier silica or dust falls into the water, and that goes down the drain with a filter. The rest of it gets sucked up through the fan. And as I used this vent more often over the last few weeks, I realized I wanted some directional suction from the fan. With the elbow up here, I can tilt it towards the kiln, give me better directional suction from the kiln, and move it back. It also helps me focus suction over the top of my sanding area. Now, I've been using this vent for the last 2 weeks and found that it really helps reduce dust and clean the air in the space. With the clear silicone that I used around the plexiglass, it was very fumey, and having this on alone really helped air out the space. So I already know that this is very capable of cleaning the air in this room. I'll probably still wear a mask whenever I sand or use plaster in this space, but for now, this is a good improvement. And in the future, I see myself building some kind of enclosed hood to increase the dust collection in that area. I hope you liked this video, and maybe it inspired you to make the air in your space cleaner. Thanks so much for watching.